4 different excavations in Oak Lawn Cemetery in the area up against 11th Street in the westernmost section of the cemetery, in the area that was historically known as the Potter's Field. It was an area where people would be buried if they had no known relatives or they couldn't afford to be buried. The county or the city would pay for them to be buried in this area. This is the area where, as we announced about a month ago, that the remains of C.L. Daniel were identified. He's the first victim that we have been able to positively identify. In the process that we follow is we do the excavations, and if the remains that are found in this excavation as the team goes along, as Dr. Stackelbeck and her team go along, if they find remains that are consistent with what we were told that the county paid for people to be buried, which are men being buried in plain wooden caskets, then if the team decides that it's appropriate to exhume those remains, they're exhumed. Dr. Stubblefield and her team really go to work then on analyzing those remains, trying to identify a cause of death, and then, if we're really fortunate, to collect DNA from those remains. And then that DNA is provided to the team at Intermountain Forensics, who have been running what they can through to create DNA profiles and feed them into genealogical databases. And that whole process that I just talked about is ultimately what led us to Mr. Daniel. But it all starts with the excavations. And the challenge for us is that we are looking for our fellow Tulsans who were murdered and buried in a cemetery amidst people who had nothing to do with the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. For the early part of the 20th century, this was the main cemetery for the city. And so the challenge for this technical team is that they're going through and finding an extraordinary number of graves that have nothing to do with the search that we're looking for right now. And they have to differentiate all these different individuals that they're coming across from potentially the 18 people, at least, that we're looking for here. So it has been a tremendous challenge, and through all of that, and I really want to thank, and I have before, but Brenda Nails-Alford has been out there every step of this investigation as our community liaison, assisting in the search and bringing that community-oriented perspective to the technical team's search. I'm going to let each of them speak about what has been discovered during this excavation, but I do want to add, just from a personal standpoint, I had time to go out yesterday and spend time with them on the site. And, you know, what we've seen over the course of this search is that we started out with really no records at all about who's buried and where in this section of this cemetery. No understanding of what would be underground there. If you will recall, in our first excavation, we discovered construction fill. I mean, that's how little the city's records were around what existed in this cemetery. And each of the excavations has yielded a greater understanding of what's underground in that cemetery, which has allowed that focus to hone in and in and in. Well, at least maybe as the non-scientist, that the emotionally taxing part of where we are in this search right now is that these folks are encountering a far higher frequency of victims of trauma, of obvious trauma. Not normal remains that you might find through somebody who died of natural causes, but our fellow Tulsans who died violent deaths. It is I know each of the people that are involved in this have developed a real, I think, personal connection to the search, but it's a keen reminder that the people that we are searching for, our fellow Tulsans, they're not just names in history. These are our neighbors who were murdered in horrible ways. And so I just want to reiterate how grateful I am for the team that is doing this work and for the unflagging support of the citizens of Tulsa to fund this search and the unanimous support of the City Council to continue this search and to see it through. And their faith in that work and their belief that it ought to be done is now yielding the results that we have been hoping for so long. So I'm going to first turn it over to our state archaeologist and the lead on the archaeological work on this, Dr. Carrie Stackelbeck.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mayor. I appreciate all those words, and thank you also to the citizens of Tulsa, to the City Council for your continued support and patience. It does take time for us to work through these steps that we go through, and we are, as the Mayor noted, finding individuals that we have been looking for. So just to kind of provide a report, kind of a summation of what we have been doing over the course of this current round of field work. We are going to be wrapping up today, this afternoon. We have exhumed 10 individuals as of yesterday, and we have another individual that we know we will be exhuming this afternoon, so that will bring our total to 11. Among those individuals, we have 3 additional confirmed gunshot victims. 2 of those gunshot victims display evidence of munitions from 2 different weapons, meaning that those 2 individuals were shot with at least 2 different kinds of arms. We have the 3rd individual who is a gunshot victim also displays evidence of burning. So this is definitely our largest number of very obvious cases of trauma that we have uncovered during the course of a single field season. And clearly the gravity of those discoveries weighs heavily on our team, but it's very clearly important. And I'll leave to Dr. Stubblefield some of the other details that she has ascertained for some of those individuals through the course of her work on the forensic side of things. I will note, too, to kind of follow up on what the Mayor was noting about the lack of records that we had for Section 20 and the lack of information that we had available at the start of this work. It has meant that each phase of our investigation has been cumulative in nature, and we have built on each previous phase to learn more about this area of the cemetery. At this point, we have documented over 190 graves in Section 20. Only five of which had headstones that were visible on the ground surface at the start of our investigation. So coupled with the lack of information in the inventory that the city had for this part of the cemetery, that just is very telling about, we know people are out there, but they just were not, records were not adequately maintained for them. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Stubblefield.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to all of you viewers out there and those of you who are present, because once again, every time you view these press releases, you're helping us to restore the history to those victims and their descendants of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So thank you for your participation in that way and your courage. So while the field end of our activity will end today, the lab end will continue until we've thoroughly examined all of the individuals we've exhumed. As you've heard from my colleague, Dr. Steckelbeck, we will bring in the 11th individual today. We x-ray every individual as they come in, so we don't have a firm count on the amount of trauma because we visually identified gunshot wound, well, not the wound, but the presence of a bullet in the person we're exhuming today. We did that also for the individual we call 135. Burial 135 had an observable bullet. Burial 194 also had an observable bullet, but in those cases, X-ray for 135 and 194 revealed additional projectiles, really. 135 had, is this too bold to speak about the type of damage? Am I going to freak people out if I say the type of damage? Okay, well, I mean, know your audience, but 135 had a bullet in his torso area, but he'd also been shot by a shotgun into his left foot, right ankle. So he had two different forms, and 194 just has two different calibers, remarkably different calibers of bullet. And so we'll be continuing the work just to examine, because as you remember from Mr. Daniel, he had no observable forms of trauma. So not seeing trauma does not exclude one of these males in a plain casket from being a victim, as you'll recall. So we'll continue to work until everyone's examined, and then I'll still be available. Members of my team will still be available as we proceed to whatever our next phase is in getting them properly reinterred until the families are contacted through our DNA work, because that stage does take longer. But it is our mission to get these people reattached to their family if possible, and remove them from being unknown individuals or discarded individuals, disassociated from family. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I am so very pleased with the progress that has been made in these latest endeavors to find victims of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Focusing on the areas that we're working on shows the due diligence in this mission and has revealed absolutely amazing results, especially in the identification of Mr. C.L. Daniel as a victim of the Tulsa Race Massacre. For many years, these areas in which we have focused have been of interest as it was shared by survivors and others within the community that victims had been buried there. Again, the due diligence has proven to be of huge significance in these endeavors. This work has definitely laid the groundwork for continued efforts to bring some of the justice and healing to the families of those who lost family members so tragically, and also to our community as well. And it is my prayer that these efforts continue to bring more justice and healing to those who were lost and to those families in our community. I am forever grateful to Mayor G.T. Bynum and the City of Tulsa for allowing these processes to move forward after so many years. And to our awesome team members and our team leaders who do this hard work that has brought us to this point in time in history. I am forever grateful also for this opportunity to serve and to be amongst such awesome people who work so hard to find our history. And this process will stay in my heart forever. And I am forever grateful. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, anytime we do these, we're cognizant of the fact that we're hoping that there are potentially descendants of victims who may have an interest in this because you don't know what happened to your ancestor or your relative. If you see this, please visit the 1921 Graves Facebook page or on our city website. You can find at cityoftulsa.org/1921graves all of our updates, photo, video, everything that we have available is right there for you to review, and then you can reach out to us directly with any questions that you might have about engaging in the process. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
We are streaming live. If you have a question, we have a microphone here.
Just for Dr. Stubblefield, I just wanted a clarification on when you say you found evidence of a bullet. Did you mean you found a physical bullet, or just evidence that the person had been shot?
Yes. So for 135 and 194, we saw the bullet during the exhumation process. The bullets, I should say, they're actually not even the same caliber between the individuals. And then when we got them into X-ray, the shotgun pellets were observed on 135. Then 194, we observed. I mean, this is all coming so fast. Do bear with me because this was this morning. We saw the smaller caliber bullet in 194. so recent. I can't tell you exactly where in his torso it is, but it's a torso uh, bullet, and these both of these individuals, oddly enough, had bullets observable. Um, I keep wanting to say you need to be there, but some of these things aren't. I try to. The families need to see this. If they can stand it, not us really. But the bullet on 195, the one we're exhuming, that one was physically visible. 194 benefited more from X-ray, but we're seeing both patterns. So yes. So when we see a bullet in the exhumation process, we collect it then, so it's not lost. And then it's the X-ray process where we end up seeing if there are any other signs of projectile damage. We are still discussing our recommendations and what to recommend as we proceed. You're correct to keep track of the numbers because we are looking for men in plain caskets. But sometimes that means we exhume someone, and after we get done with the analysis, it's not a man. But I can say that women often do not get buried in plain caskets, which says something socially, but I am a biological anthropologist and will let you make that conclusion yourself. But we do have greater numbers than our total 18 because of the historic practice of who gets a plain casket. I mean, there's some temporal significance to the zone we're excavating, but it's not concrete or form. It's not a pattern we could observe to ease our timing. So yes, but we're still forming our recommendations for our future actions.
And I think your question is really relevant from the process standpoint. So at every phase of this investigation, from the City of Tulsa standpoint, we've taken the position that these are the experts. So they go out, they do the work, and then they come back and make a recommendation to us on what should be done next and how much that's going to cost. And then my job as the mayor is to figure out how to pay for that and empower them to do what they're recommending. And that's what we've done in every step of this. That's what we'll do for the remainder of my time as mayor. And then my hope is, regardless of who the next mayor is, that they see how important it is to see this investigation through and to follow through on any of the recommendations that this technical team presents, because the recommendations that they've been giving us have led us as far as we have made it, which is further than the city's ever gotten in 103 years on this.
I have two questions. First, there was evidence of burning, you said, on one of these victims. Was that one of the three victims that you were mentioning, 135, 194, 195, or was that an additional victim?
No, yes. The burning is on 195, the burial 195 individual.
And then my other question was, I wrote down that you said that there was 190 graves that were documented. Can you walk me through the difference between those 190 documented graves versus the 11 that you guys have actually been able to exhume? Those are two obviously vastly different numbers.
Sure. So our process, because we don't have a roadmap, right? We don't have a document that says dig here. We have opened up excavation blocks that allow us to discover where graves are located first, and then as we excavate down and we remove that overburden over the graves, we get down to the level at which we actually encounter the coffins themselves. Once we get to that point, then we can actually expose that burial container and determine whether or not that's an individual that we will pursue for further investigation based on the type of the burial container. Is this a simple wooden casket of an adult size that fits the parameters that we're looking for? And so we can all do that. We can do all of that in a relatively, it looks like a lot, but it's actually a minimally invasive process. At that point, we're just moving dirt. And so it's through that process that we are able to locate where graves are in the ground and we map them in. And even if that way, even if we don't pursue some of those graves because they do not meet our parameters, we can at least document where they are, and we will be providing these maps and all of these data to the city so that they will have a much more robust set of data and knowledge about where graves are in Section 20 than they did previously. So does that, I hope that helps.
And so you guys said 3 of the 11 had signs of trauma. Now, if the lab is kind of taking over and continuing, are they all still being tested? Can we see more signs of trauma come forward?
It's entirely possible, and that's exactly what they'll be doing over the course of their next time. I don't know if you want to ask.
No, I can address that. So one of the part of our process is after we've documented that the remains are in the lab and then we x-ray all of them, we clean every bone and visually examine it. So gunshot wound trauma, sometimes it'll leave lead on bone if it hit bone, but we're still looking for other forms of trauma. Some are harder to distinguish with after years or decades of burial, like just a simple fracture becomes debatable when you have to weigh whether pressure from the earth caused it early on versus that was there at death. So this will be a process that continues for all 11 individuals and until we've documented what we can, because in the sense of timing, the preservation, these individuals, some of them are better preserved than others. Their skeletons are in better shape, but the clock is still ticking on how long those skeletons will remain observable. And so we're just progressing at pace to give them all a thorough exam, but it does take time to get to where we can see what we can document and then establish trauma, health issues. Sometimes we get individuals with clear health issues that may be the actual cause of death if there's no other sign. We've had a few that way, so we are analyzing for that. Mm-hmm.
Well, our OU number is 47.
Oh, that's right. Okay, no, that
46.
does work. Okay, so
46.
no, so right now it's 46. So when we get back, it'll be 47. Well, this afternoon.
And all of the 11 this time are all men?
No,
They
they come in as people in plain caskets.
You don't know.
No, I do know for sure, or at least as far as is skeletally indicated after analysis, because you have to know your population. And what I will say is that there were some robust women operating in the 1920s. Not saying women aren't robust now, but these were washerwomen largely by occupation. You can look that up historically, and their shoulders show it. And so until we clean the remains off, often we have someone in a plain casket. So one of those someones has turned into a woman. And will another one turn into a woman? We have to clean it off. Clean enough of the skeleton off, and we are assuming adequate preservation that we get the parts that will help us tell what sex someone is. But our ability to estimate sex has been very robust. By that I mean when the DNA results come back, they may not get a profile, but they'll get which sex the person was, and we are in agreement. The only differences have been when we couldn't tell because preservation didn't allow it, and they designated the sex. But when we knew it, they knew it, and we've been in agreement.
Any last questions? Emery?
It looks like you've hit the parameters of that section. Do you think there's any utility in going further under the sidewalk or going west? Do you think you've hit the edges of the cemetery absolutely, where they're buried?
Good question.
And we're pretty much all of them in individual shafts as opposed to like a communal trench.
So what we are seeing amongst these that we've exhumed this round, they are all in individual shafts and individual graves. And then in terms of, so there's like multiple parts to your question, so I'll try to get to them all. But so Yes, so amongst these 11, they're in individual graves. And we have been compiling our information about the extent of the graves, so looking at our full exposure of our excavation trenches. And so we are in the process of processing those maps to document how far those graves go. But we will be taking all of that information into consideration as we make recommendations about whether we believe there's cause to take additional steps and continue with that excavation process.
Any last? All right. Almost?
When you, now when you, with the benefit of looking back at all the 47 that have now been exhumed, but all that you've seen, what can you guys say about that in a broad sense of who those people were, or what can you say about what happened then, or is there a conclusion that, I know you've got a big report to write, but as of today, what can you say about the 47 people that you're pulling out of the ground and taking a look at?
I mean, I'll speak first because I look at their skeletons. Now, keep in mind that we are biased toward sampling men. As I've stated before, the women tended to have nicer caskets. It speaks to social groups or social connections that allow to more formal funerary processes. The men we've exhumed, gold teeth were very popular in the 1920s. I can say that. And many of the individuals have possessed gold teeth. Their dentition tended to be excellent, however, compared to now. Remember, I look at forensic cases, and often bad teeth are more common than excellent teeth, and the people, male and female, of the 1920s generally had excellent teeth. But we've also seen many individuals, mostly male, with enamel hypoplasias, which means that there are gaps in the enamel on their teeth that tend to occur when you've been very ill as an infant, babe in arms infant, very ill. And so the occurrences of extreme illness in that population speaks to different health care. People born in the late 1800s were subjected to some infectious diseases. We usually would say it was an infectious disease, high fevers that would cause that kind of effect, enamel hypoplasias. And the gold teeth are probably related to that because it destabilizes the enamel. So you could lose a tooth or you could crown it. These were people who worked hard. They tend to be robust. We haven't seen a lot of people, I take that back. We have seen some chronic illness in at least 3 of the individuals, perhaps 4 over time, but and very few of them got very old. I mean, middle age or younger. We have quite a few 20-year-olds. Well, more than one. I don't see a lot of 20-year-olds in our modern forensic sample, but we've got 20-year-olds. So it's that kind of demographic. But these people worked hard.
Any last thoughts, Mayor?
Well, I think that, that how many, again, graves have you identified so far?
Oh, how many graves? 190.
190. So when I've said in the past that this is like looking for a needle in a pile of needles, that's what I mean. We're looking for probably around 18 graves at least, and in the midst of over 100 other people who were buried not as victims of the race massacre, presumably. And so that presents a tremendous challenge. I also think, that the work that they have to do to identify, most of these people that have been identified never were exhumed. They're able, because of the excellence of the technical team, they're able to identify in the ground that they don't need to come out, and so they've remained and been undisturbed. But the level of technical expertise that has been applied to this is extraordinary. And I also think it's really important to emphasize, literally while we are standing here talking with you, the DNA and genealogical team is at work and have been since we held our last press conference talking about Mr. Daniel. And they are working with the fruits of what this team has been able to provide from the standpoint of DNA and other relevant information about the remains that have been found that we are hopeful will then help them make those ultimate identifications. But it is all part of that sequence that is necessary for us to ultimately find people who were murdered and hidden over a century ago. And that presents a tremendous technical challenge. And I'm, again, just so grateful that we have this team in place who's remained so committed. I mean, there has not been any turnover on this team. Everybody is all in on trying to identify these victims so that their families can have the same opportunity that Mr. Daniels' family now has to give him a proper burial. So again, I'm very grateful. I appreciate the help of the media in raising awareness around this issue and spreading the word, not just here in Tulsa, but all over the world. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Once again.
That was great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate all your work. Of course.
This makes such a difference.
Well, like I told you yesterday, I'm just grateful you stuck with it.
There was an update. I talked to one of the genealogists yesterday, and Kyra Carby